You've seen the big plays.
Durrant stepping to his right, looking, stopping, firing, end zone, touchdown!
You've heard what the playmakers and coaches have had to say.
Up for a three. Got it!
But now it's time to go behind the mic with BYU sports broadcasters to get their distinctive take on the games.
Oh, what an aggressive play!
This is Behind the Mic with host Cleon Wall.
We're here to bring you unique insights from the BYU sports broadcasters who cover the Cougars and from the Cougars themselves. We're going to really lean into the unique insights, including the biggest game at the Marriott Center this season.
BYU hosting number 8 Gonzaga here at the Marriott Center. Time to meet.
But before we get to the Zags and Cougs, let's rewind to the start of the week. That's when I sat down with Harrison Collier, a live sports producer for BYUtv. He was part of the broadcast crew who worked on the first two matches of the men's volleyball season against McKendree and number 14 Lewis.
Crazy athletic ace off of Gibbs. Capono Brown, 4 aces now. He's got
While the broadcast went well, Harrison and the other crew members could not rely on muscle memory from the women's volleyball season.
Both sports are different, and so it takes some time to get people used to it, especially with men's volleyball. The speed of the game is so much faster that whether it be our replay operators who are trying to hurry and show a replay before the next whistle, or our camera operators and stuff trying to follow the ball. Men's volleyball is a little trickier in that aspect of how quick the game is. And so I think that's it takes a little bit of time, but if once they get a couple games, then they kind of settle in and it's like, oh, okay, I can do this.
Harrison has been a BYU-TV producer for 11 years. His job is telling the story of the game or match while it's going on. And the story of these first two matches was basic.
And certainly BYU coming off a season that wasn't their best yet.
BYU wasn't ranked as one of the top teams in the nation.
They've always been ranked since their program began, 35 years ago. They always began ranked, which is pretty impressive. And the fact that they started this season not ranked was kind of a new territory for BYU. So that storyline on top of not having to break in a new setter, not having your 3-time All-American in Davide Gardini, those were some key storylines of how was this team going to mesh.
Boom! Smokes. Capono Brown.
BYU beat McKendree in straight sets, but it wasn't a satisfying win. Capono Brown was on fire, but outside hitter Mix Romanis and the others didn't play so well. So Harrison said the storyline for the second match was if the rest of the team was going to show up.
I mean, even in our in-game interview with Sean Olmstead, he was visibly frustrated that there was no one else really stepping up in that first match. And usually the second night, for guys that aren't used to being in the spotlight, they kind of taper off. And so it's like, if Capono falls, then what? What do you do? And so, but the crazy thing is Capono stepped up and was able to continue what he was doing. And then you had Mix play a little bit better. And then your middle blockers were almost perfect throughout the match. And so that kind of helped them to get into a groove.
Oh, that's a big swing right there.
Mix Romanis.
BYU beat Lewis in 4 sets and is now ranked 13th in the Coaches Poll. They now prepare for Fairleigh Dickinson.
My name is Brandon Crow, and I'm a sports producer.
Crow was also busy over the weekend producing the women's basketball game on Saturday. And the story of this Cougar squad has been consistent throughout this season.
It's been like a running storyline this whole year of Amber Whiting, the first-year head coach, and how she's trying to navigate the waters of doing that and being at that level. But also Lauren Gustin. Lauren Gustin is one of the top 40 players in the country, according to ESPN. And she, coming into Saturday, had a double-double in 14 of 15 games.
Lauren Gustin then seized a rebound, and the story changed.
And Gustin secures her 24th rebound. She's got a new career high and has tied the Marriott Center record.
In the first half, she had like 14 rebounds or something crazy. And so we're just tracking that. And so then you communicate that in-game with the graphics guys. And so then we have like a little monitor. And at one point, I think in the third quarter, Lauren Gustin had more rebounds herself than the opposing team. And so then San Diego. And so we put that graphic up there just to kind of put things into perspective for people. As a producer, you're always watching it, but once it gets into like kind of obscurity, you really have to be able to think about, okay, big picture style. I know us as BYU fans and producers, we're kind of numb to Lauren Gustin's numbers. But for those who, might be tuning in for the first time, you always have to be thinking about those people who might be tuning in for the first time. And so that's why you're just constantly throwing that out there. But specifically once we get in the double digits, that's when it's like, okay, here she goes again. How many can she get?
I try not to pay too much attention to it. I just want to get the win. But, they mentioned they got to get one more board. There was 5 seconds left, so I was like, probably not going to happen, but we'll do our best. But, I just tried to stay locked in on the score.
Brandon has seen this team evolve as the season has progressed.
And I think for the confidence level for the team, from my producer's perspective, I've seen that grow definitely. And I've seen Lauren Gustin's performance on the court and off the court as a leader really take shape in the locker room, and it's really her confidence is oozing onto her teammates, and they've been able to see themselves come through in the game, and I think that confidence level has only continued to elevate their play on the court.
Robinson, right corner, Spence, and Spencer Johnson knocks down the three-pointer.
With the men's basketball team's victory in San Diego over the weekend, BYU Sports Nation producer Ben Bagley invited assistant coach Cody Thieger on the program.
So offensive rebounding, transition D, and defensive rebounding.
But the real reason to talk to Cody was to preview the game against number 8 Gonzaga.
It's just really important to all of us and our team and our players. It's something that we all talk about and care about, and something important for the fans. A neighbor would drive by and he'll say, hey, good luck against Gonzaga. Go get Gonzaga. That's the most important thing.
Having talked to these guys long enough, you know that this is a big game. It is the game every year. You get the Zags, one of the best teams in the nation, not just the best team in the conference, on your home floor. So, everybody, fans, players, coaches, this game's always circled, and it's always a spotlight game.
The guys are really excited about it.
Even though it is the biggest home game of the year for the BYU men's basketball team, Ben and the Sports Nation guys, we're still talking lots of football.
Every move has been made, but in your opinion at this time, is BYU a net positive or negative in the transfer portal transaction?
Well, every day we ask ourselves, what topic's going to bring the greatest amount of juice from the audience? What are they most interested in? BYU, we joke about it all the time that BYU is actually a volleyball school or a cross-country school because that's where they have the most success on court. But the BYU is a football school, and we could talk BYU football 365, and that needle's moving. But we're in the midst of basketball season, and we're still even leading up to the Zags game. We've done 3 shows this week to this point as of the taping this interview, and our A block every day has been football. We've been talking transfer portal. We've been talking transfer quarterback signing and Jake Retzlaff. Football has been the driving subject since May.
Spencer and Jerem dished out their hot takes 8 months before BYU plays their first game as a member of the Big 12.
Okay, topic 2. What is your way too early hot take now that the 2022 season's over for the 23 BYU football season?
BYU is going to have a better offense this year than they did last year.
That's hot. Yep.
The mild sauce take here is BYU is going to start the season 3-0.
Mine is that BYU wins 8 games. They just come out and they go.
I think those are reasonable. I like the adjusted expectations of eight games now being a good season, because we don't know. The Big 12 was awesome to watch as a college football fan this year because you had TCU making the national championship game but not showing up. Sorry TCU. But you had a conference that everybody was gettable. All the games were very, very equal, and there's great parity in the league. Does that give BYU hope to have success next year? Maybe, but I still think they're probably a middle team, maybe upper middle team in the Big 12 next year. And if I had a hot take for it, let's just say my hot take would be in November. We're still mapping out paths to a possible conference championship game appearance. Just you're still in play in the 1st of November. That would be my hot take.
There were no hot takes about the BYU Gonzaga game on Tuesday's BYU Basketball with Mark Pope show.
Well, it's a fun week. Like, it's a fun week, right? I like where our team is right now. The guys have been really committed.
But that's on purpose, according to the show's producer, Hema Heimuli.
Last year was my first year doing all these shows, and in those shows for both the Kalani Sitake show and the Mark Pope show, like, we went heavy on, the game coming up and all that stuff. And we found that it was kind of, our time and our energy is better spent showcasing the athletes that are on the show, because, after the season's come and gone, like, what you have is, an interview with Alex Barcelo, or you have an interview with Jackson Robinson that, like, you'll be able to look back on and remember that player. And let's be honest, like, throughout the BYUtv shows that we have here and BYU radio shows, there's going to be plenty of Gonzaga talk. And so we try to now use the coaches' shows as like a way to showcase the human side of our athletes and our coaches.
The player to be featured in this coaches' show was Jackson Robinson.
About it, just the rivalry, I guess. Is Gonzaga a rivalry?
Sure.
Yeah. So, I know it's a big game. So
the show usually has a fun segment each week. This time it involved the game headband.
This is stressful, man. You think Thursday's stressful. This is stressful.
As soon as we find out who the player guest is going to be on the show, I try to do a fun game that's kind of tailored to that player. And I tell this to my student producers. There's a purpose for it, right? You want to, not only have it be fun, but you want it to showcase some kind of element of that athlete that, like, people don't know about, but then also provide like a space where him and Pope, you can see their relationship, and Greg's really good at like bringing up that relationship too and making it lighthearted and fun. And so as soon as we know who the athlete is, we tailor the game to them, and then that day, like later on that day, we'd come up with some kind of game and we put it all together right before the show.
How do you think it went?
Oh, it was great. Last night was awesome. It went a lot better than expected, because, with players like Jackson Robinson, who just transferred for this season, right? We didn't know anything about him. I didn't know if he would like be really shy and soft spoken, but he turned out to be a great guest on the show. And Greg, credit to Greg and Mark, they're really good at teeing up the players to show their personality.
Did I grow up as one of the greatest cattle hands in Oklahoma history?
Yes!
Yes, Jackson Robinson. Let's go, baby.
Mark Pope also got a bit emotional during the show because his high school coach was in the audience.
And that's all fine and great, but he taught me so much about like being a human being and about how to work with people and love people, and super special to me.
The point of having a coaches show is to show the more human element of all the coaches and the athletes that come on the show, and more often than not, it's us displaying the human side of the athletes, and you don't get as much with the coach. But we had a moment last year in the Kalani Sitake show where we ran his Deep Blue about him and Fessy and their relationship, and he got emotional in that one, and that was really cool to see. And then for this one, seeing someone in the audience that molded Coach Pope, and you saw how much it meant to Coach Pope to have him there, that was really cool to see too.
When we come back, a big game with the Zags was not the only big sporting event for the Cougars this week. Welcome back to Behind the Mic. BYU's gymnastics team's first meet of the season wasn't the greatest, even though Rebecca Ripley's Barbie Girl floor routine went viral. At the Super 16 in Las Vegas, BYU's team score ranked 15th. It surprised former Cougar gymnast and current gymnastics analyst McKell Merkley. But McKell admits she's a bit spoiled.
Ever since Guard has taken over, the program has just done so well. So when they do have a bad meet, it's almost like we're like, what the heck happened? Like, that's a very average team for a lot. That's a very average score for a lot of teams. However, because they do so well, it is surprising. I didn't get to see a lot of the meet. I tried to, not as many routines were shown as I had hoped for at the streaming into Super 16 meet. So the ones I did see, they were quite good, but I think we just had a few learning mistakes. We had to count a few falls on the events, That's always really hard. And then what you'll find with gymnastics is when you put in a new routine, sometimes you think that certain elements are going to score well that end up not scoring well. So I think we'll see some changes to some routines, and those scores will definitely go up.
The next meet, the best of Utah against Southern Utah, Utah State, and those Red Rocks from the University of Utah. What is it like for a BYU gymnastics team, or even as a BYU gymnast, you were one yourself, when you face off against the University of Utah?
So gymnastics is a little bit different from other sports. It has no defense. So it really doesn't matter who you go against because you're just looking at scores. So all the teams, we're going into a meet where there's going to be 4 teams there this weekend. And obviously doing well is fun, winning is fun, but really all 4 teams can take their scores and put them toward their national score, which is great. As a gymnast, I did like competing up at the U just because their fan base really shows up for them. So it's always really fun getting to compete in front of those really big crowds.
Is it a friendly rivalry or is it you just want to beat them so bad? Because when you think of the University of Utah, they're always so good. It seems like they're always like a top 5 team, and it's like, man, I just like to beat them one time.
They are always so good. They have built a great program. I just think it's different for gymnastics. I think there's an aggressiveness that comes in the rivalry as far as football and basketball and those kind of sports go. I mean, you're literally making contact with the other team. But with gymnastics, you're just getting up and doing your set. And if you get in your head too much about, I want to make sure I beat that other team, then you're not focusing on the job that you have to do. You have to just get up and do your skills. And I mean, the best team is going to win at the end of the night.
McKell and Spencer Linton call all the action.
It's one of the premier gymnastics meets every year in the entire country because we're talking about perennial powerhouse Utah gymnastics. The Red Rocks are top of their game, typically a top 4 squad year in and year out, and are always a favorite to make the NCAA championships. So the fact that they are there, that alone makes it a draw. But throw in BYU, which under Guard Young has had, for the most part, a steady rise in the gymnastics world, and Utah State is an up-and-coming team. Southern Utah is a team that has been a perennial top 25 team for most years over the past few decades. People ask me, Spencer, what's your favorite sport to broadcast? And what's your favorite sport to watch? And I'll give them answers, but I'll always say the most underrated thing that I do in terms of just like pure fan enjoyment and broadcast enjoyment is gymnastics, because it is so unique. The athletes are so unbelievably skilled and talented, and it is such a niche sport that it doesn't matter who's competing. If you're a gymnastics fan, what I'm learning is people will just record whatever. And so the fact that we get to display this on BYUtv, we gather this huge audience. And I'm not allowed to give numbers and ratings out, but I can tell you that it is one of the most popular sports that we broadcast on BYUtv, just by the numbers, because it appeals to all gymnastics fans. And you just don't get a lot of high-level coverage until you get to regionals and the NCAA championships. So we appreciate that we get to do that on BYUtv and bring that out. I mean, I've never left a gymnastics meet thinking, gosh, I wish I would have been doing something else.
So what is Harrison Collier's challenge producing the best of Utah meet?
The biggest one is 4 teams going on at the same time. So you have to figure out what's the most important person to follow in each apparatus. And then have to juggle, okay, so-and-so's here, but they're going on at the same time as another big person, so which one do I go to first? And then also another person just had a career high here, so then do I bump them somewhere else? Or so you're just trying to organize, okay, what's the most important storyline as you're following that. The hardest thing too with our announcers is a lot of what they're talking about has already happened. And so what you're seeing on TV is probably 2 or 3 minutes after the fact, just because it's going on at the same time. And so we're trying to show everything so everyone can see what's going on. But it's not necessarily live.
Before the gymnastics explosion at the Marriott Center in Salt Lake, Spencer would be at the Marriott Center floor for BYU Sports Nation game day for the BYU Gonzaga game, and he was going to bring the flavor of the game before the game.
First and foremost, I think I'm just trying to get an appropriate vibe and how to explain the vibe of the final BYU Gonzaga game as West Coast Conference foes in the Marriott Center. What people don't remember is while the 2020 game was just epic and Gonzaga was number 2 and BYU was number 23 and BYU upsets the Zags that night by 13, is that BYU has only beaten Gonzaga twice ever in the Marriott Center. BYU has more wins in the Kennel, 3, than they do in the Marriott Center, which is crazy, right? And so I think just trying to grasp that this is going to be the last time that these teams will meet in the Marriott Center, where BYU has had such a strong home court advantage, or so we think, but maybe not so much in this series. But yeah, trying to take in the vibe and the atmosphere and then be able to explain that to people who are not able to be in the Marriott Center of what it feels like, what it looks like, maybe some of the differences, and then some nostalgia that goes into what has become a fun rivalry in the West Coast Conference.
Right wing good for Gideon George. Gideon with his third 3. He's got
there's the normal storylines of like, oh, it's the last WCC probably matchup between the two. Who knows what it's going to be like going forward? We very well could play them in the preseason games going forward.
Hema Heimuli will produce BYU Sports Nation game day before and after the game.
I think the biggest storyline is just like Mark Pope, for some reason, like whether it's a down year or whatnot, he always seems to pull out magic somewhere. And I think BYU fans, through athletics and all of history, that's what we love most about BYU. I'm a fan too, is BYU figures out a way to pull out magic every once in a while. And we're hoping that on this particular Thursday, in this particular matchup with the behemoth that is Gonzaga, BYU is able to pull out another magic run and hopefully storm the court again.
I love it. These games are super fun, and Gonzaga's great.
BYU Sports Network analyst Mark Durrant has been the color commentator for all 29 games between BYU and Gonzaga coming into the game. The Cougs have only won 7 of those contests.
As just a basketball fan, I recognize what they've done and what they continue to do and how excellent Mark Few is. And just they've really built a great program that I think, is a team that BYU aspires to be like, being able to bring in really good transfers that are NBA-type transfers and having some real momentum with the program. And once you win games, then people want to come where you win.
But what do you think this last game at the Marriott Center will mean for you or for fans or just the BYU community in general? I always like it when BYU plays Gonzaga, even before they got into the West Coast Conference. And I'm a big fan of Gonzaga and their program over the years, going back to the 90s. So what do you think this means, this last game at the Marriott Center means for Cougar fans and maybe even you?
Well, I really appreciate the conference and Gonzaga in particular. I think that it's a good example of what a rivalry can be like. I think both fan bases are super knowledgeable and recognize good basketball. And although Gonzaga has been the dominant team, BYU has gotten a few wins, and they've been really memorable, exciting, fun wins. And so I'm going to have a lot of great memories with Gonzaga. No better games than against Gonzaga. And I think, it's just a great rivalry and one that I think other rivalries can look at as, hey, we can be civil and have fun and tease and have good basketball. And it can still be that type of thing out there in college basketball. And so, I'll have great memories, Cleon.
WCC logo, lean in, handoff low to Foose. Foose off the window, and he scores it. Great spot by.
Are you going to miss the Gonzaga rivalry?
No, I'm not.
This is BYU Sports Network studio host Jason Shepard.
I'm perfectly fine taking a bit of a break from the BYU-Gonzaga rivalry. Look, especially with what BYU's doing in terms of going into the Big 12. We already know how difficult that conference is already. I'm perfectly fine going on a break, Ross Rachel style, and and down the road, if it's something that comes back, because both Coach Pope and Coach Few, and Coach Pope mentioned it this week, they've talked and both have said they're interested in keeping it going once BYU leaves the conference. So it sounds like there's certainly something that could happen in the future. But I mean, get a couple years away from it, get your bearings in your new conference, and then if you want to do it, I don't know if it'd be a home and home or if it'd be a neutral site thing, but maybe play Gonzaga once every 3 years as a non-conference. It's probably okay. But I'm all right taking a break from the Zags.
Jason says he still likes the energy of the rivalry, but doesn't like that Gonzaga usually beats BYU. His pregame interview was with Fousseyni Traore, who was excited to play the Zags one last time in Provo.
I'm super excited to go against Durrant,
Foose actually told me that he has really studied Drew Timme film. And a lot of it is because he admires what he does, obviously, because he's so prolific. But he said the other reason is and these were his words, he said he pretty much owned me last year in the matchup. And it's been on his mind. He used it as motivation to get better. So he's looking forward to that matchup because of how highly he thinks of Drew Timme. And he knows, first of all, what type of atmosphere that the Marriott Center is going to have. He's looking forward to this opportunity because, hey, it's like with BYU football, when you beat Utah and you knew they weren't going to be on the schedule for a couple of seasons, you get to sit on that for a while. Well, this would be one where if you can somehow get Gonzaga at the Marriott Center, this will be the last chance to get them at home for certainly. There's no scheduling after this. If you can get them, you would have another one, but you could sit on that one for a while and enjoy it.
So how'd the Cougs do?
72, this one hyper crucial. 15.9 to go. Bends the knees. Shoots. Strong on
Guard the three.
BYU leading it by 2. The rebound to Gonzaga. Strother in front court with 10 seconds. Shoots a 3 and scores it. Gives the Zags the lead with 9.5. BYU can now play for the win. But the Cougs trail 75-74 on the Strother 3. Robinson in to Rudy. Rudy to the timeline with 8. To Johnson with 7. Spencer with 6 and with 5. With 4 and 3. Spencer a desperation 3. It's blocked at the arc, and that will do it. Gonzaga comes back to win it. The final score, 75-74. The Zags survive at the Marriott Center.
BYU will have at least one more chance to beat the Zags in this rivalry that is sadly going away. Thanks for listening to Behind the Mic. Download and subscribe from your favorite podcast provider or listen on the BYU Radio app. Behind the Mic is a production of BYU Radio.